Alisha, you want to share?
I'm looking to see if I can share, because sometimes I'm told I share too much.
Well, I told
You
you
should-
it won't even let me poll anymore.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to this session. I'm Joe Lloyd and will be the moderator for this session. Today we have uh, presenters Martha Hubertz, Alisha Janowsky, and Joe Fauvel, and their presentation is called, as you can see on the screen, Ready Player One: Graphics and Gamification in Course Design. So at this point, we'll go ahead and pass it off to our presenters. And just a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. So go ahead.
I feel like you're afraid of what we're going to say, that you keep mentioning that it's being recorded, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, this was like Joe's third time mentioning it was going to be recorded. Like, what are you going to do with this, Joe? Like, is there like a market for?
It'll be posted on the website.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Jump in. I'm Martha. That's Alicia, and that is one of the Joes. So here at UCF in distributed learning, we have three Joes, Joe F, Joe L, and then returning Joe. So she gets her own special thing because, that's how it goes. So for years now, Alisha and I've been working closely with Joe Fauvel in graphics. We've done quite a few projects. We are now redoing courses to keep them relevant based on student feedback. And both of us have started incorporating gamification along with those graphics. So trying to put the two together so that it's not a game over here and graphics over here, but integrating the two things. We have collected a mountain of data on this in terms of how students think about it, how they feel about it, and how engaging they think that is.
So, as I've gotten used to saying around my 12-year-old, the kids these days, and my trying to understand the kids these days, what we know is that they're interacting with visually rich stuff every single day, right? We all are. And I'm willing to bet that there are some people right now who have their phones open and are currently trying to save a king from some sort of balloon catastrophe that I was just trying to save him from, right? So we're all, that King's game that they're always advertising that you don't need the internet for. I was traveling, but anyway, I digress. Right. So we're all using these things all the time, and we've gotten very used to seeing them. And when we don't, there's a really stark difference. Right. And we know that some traditional courses, like if I go back into my old courses, they seem very stark. There's just, kind of text there, maybe a cat meme or two, but they don't have necessarily the same, I'll use the really technical word of oomph, that's going to grab student attention and keep them focused and have them wanting to click on the next page and stay in the class. And what research tells us is that students report higher motivation in gamified learning environments, and some of them can even spell the word environment without the typo, which is nice, and I apologize that I did not. But we were talking just before we started, and I know some of you were here, about the point systems that we're all engaged in right now, which is trying to make it on the leaderboard for the app that we're using, right? There's a motivation that's there, even though we recognize maybe that the email that I got from my co-presenter inviting me to have a meetup so we could chat may not be the most authentic thing she ever sent me, but it's trying to get those points, right? There's something about that engagement and watching your name go up and watching the numbers that continue to increase. And what we want to try to do is capitalize that in our classrooms and get our students feeling that way. So the visual elements that we have that are going to help get them there is where we're trying to bridge the gap. So how do we get these, games that we may have had with just crossword puzzles and things like this? How do we incorporate these graphics that we're used to seeing to get students motivated?
And I want to add on that. So, how many of you actually are part of the leaderboard, right? So, there's a couple of us who are clearly feeling somewhat competitive about our shining moment on the leaderboard. And then there are other people who refuse to play and are just, this doesn't work for them. At the end of the day, part of it is what are you trying to accomplish, right? So, one of the polls you guys filled out, or the community filled out, was what's your primary goal for implementing gamification? And overwhelmingly, the top response was student engagement and participation. And this is one of those things we always have conversations about, right? What is engagement? And does it look the same for us as it does for students? Some things it's easy to measure, right? Like I can go into courseware and I can see how many pages students clicked or how much time was spent in the chapter. I can see, if they opened Alicia's YouTube video. I can't see if they watched it in 5 times speed or that they just immediately left, but I can see they clicked on it. So, hey, that's something. But how do we measure engagement? What are we really looking at? And if that's our goal, does gamification get us there? Because we think it does, but does it really?
So just in case you're new to the world of gamification, what is it that we're really meaning here? So when we talk about gamification, we're talking about incorporating game design elements into our courses to try to capitalize on that engagement and increase their motivation. And things that they found to be most effective are things like points, badges. I don't know if you've heard that there's a leaderboard going on for this particular conference, but that's a thing. Having challenges that they need to complete, and having these course narratives that are pulling it together. And other meta-analyses that have looked at this have shown that there are lots of positive effects with what students perceive the class to be, how engaged they are. But it's also important to recognize that we want to keep this somewhat social. Right. So yes, there are games that we like to play on our own. So, saving your king in Royal Match or whatever it is, or Sudoku. But there's also what we're trying to get with our students engaged in multiple levels. We want them engaged with the course content. We want them engaged with the faculty, and we want them engaged with each other. So trying to find ways to bring in that collaborative component is important. And we also want to make sure that, as Martha was kind of saying with redoing some of her classes, that novelty kind of diminishes over time. And I think we all saw this a little bit with the pandemic and with Zoom. So back in the day, pre-pandemic, I used to have these class meetings once a week, and it was so novel for my online classes. Like I met with them for 20 minutes and I teach statistics. So we did a math problem or two, and they were like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever. I can't believe that she's doing this. And now they're like, well, why wouldn't you be doing this? Right? Is the expectation has changed. We've moved from asynchronous to asynchronous plus. And even if they never show up for it, the expectation is that it's still going to be there. So we have to somewhat stay ahead of the curve as much as we can.
And I want to throw in one of the other things we're looking at. So, obviously, Alicia talked about a meta analysis. For those of you who aren't aware of what those are, it's basically you look at a ton of different studies on the same thing, you find out where the overlap is, and you thus increase your sample size. It also gives you a better range of participants because you're collecting from all over the place. So it tends to be better data. The issue here is we're talking 2020, exactly 2020 at spring break. Everything kind of shifted for us, and it shifted for our current students, so our incoming students. So last night in class, I'm talking to students and they have never not known online. They immediately were put into an online situation. They're, the end of their junior high career. They started high school online, and for many of them, they were still online sophomore year in the state of Florida. Some of them were with the FLVS, some of them were with their local school board district, some of them were with their local school. And these three may have done great jobs or maybe not so great jobs, depending on which situation they were in. But their expectations, I think, for what these things look like go far beyond, hey, I've got a YouTube channel, or here's my Panopto video, or these sorts of things. Mixed mode, they're not expecting you to just sit there lecturing. Online, they definitely are not expecting to open your course and just see a ton of words. This is a generation that's used to Kahoot. They're used to Alex. They're used to Mentimeter. They're used to these teaching tools because that's what the Florida school system's been using.
But then the other part of this we want to keep in mind is when we use them, what's the right one to use? So some of the polls that Martha put up were, what do you think is the best theme for your class or for students, or what is the best way to keep them motivated? And students also can feel that too. Like if you're just trying a little too hard, as my son tells me I do a lot. So I'm aware of how this can go wrong quickly. But the point being, you don't want technology to wag the dog, right? We want to choose technologies and choose interactions and choose the elements very mindfully, very thoughtfully, so that it plays a role in the class and it's going to help us meet that learning objective. If it's just there, then it's the equivalent of busy work for their eyes, and they're not going to be as engaged by it. And in fact, they may be somewhat turned off by it.
Yeah,
But
and I
what we
just put
know,
in the chat, that we want, again, you want to keep, and this is where instructional design comes in. So I don't know if Sue is in here. My instructional designer is in here. I see a bunch of other instructional designers in here. But that's one of those pieces to the puzzle, right? Is being mindful in design, mindful in how you're putting these things together. Neither Alisha or I, we're both big on tech. We're big on a lot of the same things, but you really do need to be mindful into how are students going to approach this? Is it actually helping me meet objectives, or is it something I'm just throwing in there for no reason? Because what do students hate but busy work? So if you're throwing things in there that are just messy, they don't tend to like it. Like it needs to make sense for them. And so one of the things both of us do, whether it's with our graphics, our games, or any part of our course, is how does this make sense for our students? And how's it meeting those course learning objectives? And again, lucky enough for us, we both have amazing instructional designers. So it makes it easy for us, I think, to kind of bounce ideas off of them and make sure that it makes sense.
Absolutely. But the good news is we're all coming from different places. If you're an instructional designer, then you're probably helping a lot of different subjects and a lot of different faculty. If you're faculty, you're all teaching different things than necessarily Martha and I might be teaching because we're in the same department. But what longitudinal research tells us, what metadata tells us, is it's having an effect. It's increasing engagement. And what, as faculty, of course, we really care about is that it's also increasing retention. And that's going to help them do better on their assessments. That's going to help them keep that information moving into the next phases of their academic career or their job in the real world. All right, so I'm going to let Joe talk about different types of graphics that can be used. So Joe, just tell me when you want me to change screens.
Sure, you can change it now. So this is an example of one of the IDs here, Ashley. She met with her faculty, and one of the ways that we're finding faculty want to engage the students. They want to show their personality. I think Martha does a good job at that, Alisha, stuff that they like to show through. So it kind of makes the student more engaged. It gives like a one-on-one feel to that. So, oh, I got, you're not just some stuffy professor or something, you actually are a person. You like stuff. Um, so Ashley met with the faculty member. She's a nursing faculty, and she loves Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted, the movie, Excellent Adventure. And Ashley knew nothing about it, which I could not believe. So she went to AI for it. And I know AI has been very popular. You talked about Claude, and, we have, Chat GBT and all that. It seems to be really good with maybe writing, coding. Graphics is not so much there. Like Martha talked about earlier, we kind of found that a lot of it looks the same. A lot of it looks like that 2000s kind of gaming video game look, kind of like this. So, but it is good for us graphic designers. Like, this is what Ashley gave me, one of the examples. You can go to the next one, Alisha, too. She gave me 3 examples. This is one, this is the second, and you can go to the third. I got the idea, but this is way off. This is not Bill and Ted at all. Like, it's maybe 10% of it. So this is unusable in all aspects. Like, the text is wrong, it doesn't even spell right. But with this, I did the next slide. This is what we ended up doing. So I ended up customizing everything. Usually, I know Bill and Ted. I know all 3 movies. So this was actually easy for me to know. So actually the ones we saw before was kind of cool, how like you see in the foreground some characters and the road goes back. But in practicality, for 15, I think there's 12 modules, it doesn't work, because module 12 would be way in the background and probably be the size of a pinhead in theory. So we do this linear thing. We call these home pages, and it's just kind of a way for the students to know where they are in the course. Module 1, 2, 3, and they're also interactive in nature, meaning they're all clickable. So they don't have to go like through the course and try to find module. They could just click on module 5 and it goes right there. But like, as you can see, she loved Bill and Ted, so I did a cartoony style, because we can't really use Bill and Ted like, any of the properties. So I just did my style on it. But it goes to show you how AI can help, especially with graphics, but it isn't the be all end all. You got to watch out with that stuff. Another example is the next slide, Alicia. This was action icons they wanted. It did a decent job, but I mean, the next slide, I just did it off of these, and I think these are much better, because it's actually the Bill and Ted. That's the font. These are the style. These are the colors. The AI couldn't tell that. It couldn't tell it. And you could sit there and prompt it all day. And me and Martha were talking about this the other day, how you do prompt after prompt. It might take you hours to get what's right. Why don't I just do it, customize it myself? Because that's what I'm paid for, and that's what I'm trained in.
And, I do want to point out, not everybody is at UCF. So we, Alicia and I fully recognize how lucky we are, and
Mm.
hopefully most faculty do, that we have the Center for Distributed Learning, and we have a graphics team and a video team and instructional designers that can help us kind of craft these things and use pedagogy and research to make these decisions. We will share with you a list of resources for if you don't. That said, I will tell you the AI process, and I'm computer savvy. I've been in Adobe for years, and I got to tell you, it's not as easy to prompt and get what you need out of AI, because the default does seem to be a very specific style. And that may not be your style, or it may not be what your students are responding to. Again, part of the use of graphics for both Alicia and myself isn't just we're making our classes visually interesting, but it's instructor persona. Both of us use things that reflect who we are And whether it's a cat meme or me just using memes and specific color palettes. So students see a consistency, even though each course is themed differently. The idea that it reflects who I am, who she is there. We're in these graphics. We're not removed from them. In the same way that a faculty member that picks Bill and Ted, that's who they are. Like, you know, they're be excellent to each other as their sign off and their announcements, because that would be mine. I have aloha. Like, but, you know, students like that. It gives them a feel of who you are, particularly if you're online, right? Because online, the only way they're getting a feel of who you are is this. And even if you're blended, if you're not requiring attendance, this may be the only way that they are seeing that. Yeah, no, and I'm with you, Flo. I think it just kind of naturally works together. And I saw that Erica mentioned that too, where it's just good pedagogy is good pedagogy. It doesn't matter what modality a course is. And I think it gets back to the mindfulness that Alisha and I were talking about.
And we are spoiled, and there's no doubt of that. But I will say I had this class that I had to teach over the summer, and for whatever reason, graphics was not at my beck and call, and they weren't able to get something together for me within the 2 weeks that I found out I was going to teach this class. But my husband teaches over at Full Sail University, which is all about arts and graphics and things like this. So he had access to tons of AI graphic programs. And even though it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, it got me there. Right. So it's something I was able to do until I can get further up on the list of times that Joe is going to be available to do my class and draw me, you know, a cat cafe that I actually really wanted versus what I, don't look at me that way, versus what I got from whatever the program was that my husband plugged me into.
I'm laughing, but just so you know, like same thing with Joe, where I'm like graphics emergency, and I wound up having to do my own AI graphics, and because I couldn't get it to do what I wanted, I pivoted to a Witcher theme because I'm like, okay, maybe I could do something with that. And the bias in the system seems to want to give me that anyway. But I fed it, I no lie, like 20 pictures of, you know, Henry Cavill. And, you know, he's like a gamer. He's like a gaming deity, I think. He's not just Superman. And still, that is not what AI gave me. So fortunately, Joe has fixed it and was able to give me a cool GIF. So at least my front page wasn't like everybody else's. So that's cool. So these are some examples from our classes. As you can see, we've got Nintendo Game Boy designs, we've got comic books, we've got Clue board games, we've got it all. And I know you're going to be shocked. Alisha and I have indeed shared some of our Pokemon because we both play Pokemon Go. So, yay us. So we both share some of the same interests, and that allows us to share some of our graphics back and forth.
Yes. So to kind of pull some data on this, this is something we collected for the different study, but we asked students about over different semesters how they feel about whether or not graphics helps them stay engaged. And as you can see, it is overwhelmingly yes, this is helping them stay involved in the course, right? We have attention issues that we want to capitalize on, and this seems to be a very positive step forward. But what is even more important to me as a faculty member is that they also feel it's helping them learn, right? And that's what it is that ultimately we are trying to get them to do. We want them to learn the material, and the more that they're paying attention to the course, the more that they're interested in looking at the course, the more they're actually going to do stuff on it.
And you don't know how much I love to hear this, because as graphics, we don't really get to hear it, because there's no kind of way to get data on this without you guys, faculty, asking, like simply asking, is this working? Like we were talking about video, you can tell how many times they click on a video. You know, it keeps that data, but we don't know as graphic designers, is this making an impact unless you ask them. So this is
Well,
great data.
Well, what I can let you know is I just did some surveys with my students at the mid-semester to see how they were doing. And one of the things I asked them about was the courses that I'm teaching this semester with the Pokemon that you helped me do, and also with Mario, was that they felt it was exceptionally engaging and kept them involved.
Awesome.
And that was like the number one thing they said they liked. They hated everything else about the class that had to do with, you know, math and reading and things like this, but they really liked that there was Mario involved and that they got to battle Bowser.
Yeah, and again, you know, I've had the same feedback. Obviously, Alicia and I are both experimental psychologists, so we're not the touchy-feely tell us about your mother types at all. But we are the collect data type and really kind of look at efficacy, in this case, of something we're doing in the classroom. So it's kind of natural for us to constantly be polling our students for what do you like, what do you hate, where do I need to pivot to make this a better course for you or for future students. So last semester, Joe did this great clue themed for my forensic psych course, and we gamified it. So Claude and I each week have wrote prompts and like left clues. So they had to determine who, you know, killed Professor Enigma with what and where on campus. And we used UCF locales. So, you know, it was in the bounce house one week, the next week in the fountain, the library. So we used iconic locations on campus as well as our mascots. And Joe and I both really like horror movies. So we had like little pop figure style graphics. So, you know, part of it, I'm mindful that we wouldn't want to trigger students. It's a forensic psych course. I'm very mindful of how I present information in there just because I have 175 students in each class online. So statistically, I know what the odds are that they've been the victim of something. So I want to be mindful that I'm not like traumatizing students. So we made them cute little cartoony pop figure, two-dimensional. Students loved it. Zero negative feedback. And it really came out great. And again, student feedback was amazing. So now we are once again like working on redesigning a different class where it naturally kind of gamifies or works with the game and the graphics the way Mario, Pokemon, Clue does.
And you'll see a graphic of that in just a minute. So I'll share a little bit about some surveys I did with my students. So the two classes I was looking at are general psychology, which is our GEP course. So these are not psychology majors. Typically, they're ones who want to check the box of the courses they need to complete. And then statistics, which I'm sure you can imagine they love and cannot wait to take and spend those 16 weeks with me learning about, you know, t-tests. So I wanted to find a way to get them somewhat motivated by the course and the course content. So with Pokemon, they need to catch a new Pokemon each week, and then they take their exam as like a battle with the bad guy, and they, you know, if they win, they pass the test or something. I don't know. It wasn't that well thought out. And then with the Mario, it was supposed to be like Mario Party. And to Joe's point about humanizing and that they like things, I always tell my students, like, this all came from my son. I told him I wanted to do something, and he gave me like the lore, and it was a dissertation on the different Mario characters. And then I show him stuff. I'm like, is this right? And he lets me know if I screwed it up. And when I share that with my students, they actually like it 10 times more because it is humanizing me in the process. It's not just something that I, randomly threw up there. It had a purpose, it had a meaning. And so I surveyed them at the end of the semester and just kind of asked them about their perceptions. But also in there, we included some AI elements, which was, we asked them things like, hey, AI helped come up with some of the language that you see in here that's connecting the graphics to this storyline, like Martha was kind of saying, using Claude, which is an AI system. And what did that do? Did it feel organic to the class or did it feel forced?
And one thing I want to say, Claude is our bestie. And part of that is because Claude's really good at role play. So you have a lot of AI out there at your disposal. I will tell you, not all of them are great at role playing. Claude is one that is. So you can say, Claude, pretend you're Inspector Clouseau. And here's some information about that from the internet. And I'm looking for you to do blank. And Claude does that really well. If you're thinking of doing something like this, I would steer you towards Claude, at least right now, because of the role playing ability. So you literally role play and then tell Claude what you want them to role play. So I know someone in the chat mentioned that they're doing a game using other characters and other themes. So what you could do is, so it's Natalie. So what you could do is actually role play and then tell it what you want it to do, and it gives it back to you in this really great way. You still have to tweak it. I'm not going to say there is no work on your part, but it definitely gives you the direction, and it can remember from week to week if you choose to do it in installments like I do and you do.
Yeah. Claude and I are in a very serious relationship, but it's an open
Hey,
relationship.
hey.
So, if you, feel like you want to hang with him, I'm open to sharing that information. But just to kind of quickly go through some of the data, 70% of them agreed that the theme made the concepts more memorable. And remember, this is a stat course, so that's really saying something. 75% found that the elements helped organize the information. And again, for them, that's really huge because it is very scary for them to be in a stat class. And so being able to find the information they need, I give them like, here are the icons for everything, and I keep them consistent. So Mario is going to show you your assignment, and Princess Peach is going to give you hints and tips, or things like that. So they always know what it is they're looking for. And when I asked them about, did you know that I collaborated with Claude, most of them did not recognize it. 80% of them had no idea that I was not nearly this creative. And now I'm kind of wondering if I should have asked them that at all, because now they know I'm not that creative. But when they were then asked about the content that it came up with, they said it made it more approachable. It created that narrative. It tied all those visual elements together for them and into a coherent whole. Now, interestingly, I thought when I asked the same questions to my Gen Psych class, which was Pokemon themed, 60% said they found the theme very engaging. 70% really liked the visual elements, but a lot of them said they didn't know Pokemon. And I was really surprised because I'm like, I remember in grad school sitting on a plane with an 8-year-old for 3 hours trying to explain Pokemon to me. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And I figured, now it's the generation. They should all be in it. But apparently, yeah, but I mean, like, at least they would recognize who Pikachu is, like something. But they felt, at least a percentage of them, that it was somewhat distracting to them because they didn't recognize it. Even though I tried to also have explanations throughout the course about who each character was and what the purpose of it was. Of these, 90% didn't know that AI was involved, but again, they did feel, even if they didn't know a lot about Pokemon, the narratives that it helped create added that organization, added that coherence. So it is important to kind of keep in mind, as you guys have been looking in the chat and mentioning, we want to find themes that we like, but it also shouldn't be so esoteric that they're not going to understand it and find it as engaging, which is why I usually go with cats.
Yeah, and again, I would go to this as well. Again, my Back to the Future class, clearly students who are in my classes now, and yes, I realize this makes me mad old, and I apologize to everybody I called mad old when I was 18 and they were 20. But it is one of these things, right, where some of these are dated. So Back to the Future, which we use for my human development, you know, there's the creepy mom thing, which I think a lot of us have issues with, but it's also old. So one of the things that we did was make it Lego. And we're like, all right, they may not get the idea of what this movie is or how it fits with developmental stages, but they're gonna get Lego. Like this is a cohort that grew up on the Lego movie. So even if they didn't collect them, they've seen it. And so we kind of went that route. So our advice would be, again, even if they don't know the board game Clue, they should know, you know, horror movies. And if they don't know horror movies, maybe they know Clue. So we try to hit a couple different things, whether it's in the style of the graphics or the theme, so that
My
it's
camera's on, but I'm muted, but I am, yeah.
so we're hoping that it's something that students can relate to, because otherwise there's an issue.
So just to kind of sum up, and I want to make sure we have time for questions and discussion. If you're looking to do any kind of gamification, try to pick those elements that are going to be most engaging for students. So those progress bars, certificates, experience points, leveling up that some people are actively doing at the moment to try to get higher on the leaderboards. Social competition and collaboration.
I felt like that was a personal jab.
Not at all. I'm just trying to make it, you know, connectable and relatable to the audience. See what I did there? Team-based challenges, cooperative missions, you know, it really kind of depends on your course and how it's going to fit to your theme. This is that board that Martha was talking about just a little bit ago. But the narrative integration is also there. So having it be relatable to as many students as you can, keeping in mind you may have many different generations of students in your classes. And so the themes that they're going to get might be different, right? So trying to find something more universal, I think, can be helpful. Having it be coherent, having a storyline and a theme that's relevant to the subject. So obviously with forensics, it makes sense that, you know, they're trying to solve mysteries in a forensics type of course. And one thing that they've probably solved in the past is something like Clue. If they were to have used maybe like where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, I just dated myself by 30 years because nobody knows who Carmen Sandiego is and does not care where in the world she might currently be residing.
I'm just laughing. Or like Waldo. So I do think there are some things there. And, you know, Natalie, I love the idea with diversity. So that is something that Joe and I spent a lot of time on even our Nitro, which is one of our mascots. We have done Spring Break Nitro in 3 different skin tones, so that we can like represent. Again, UCF is an HSI, so we are one of, I think, 5 HSIs that are R1 in the country. So we've got a lot of students, we've got a lot of Hispanic students, and you know, about 50% of my class represents as a minority group member. So it's really important to us to make sure that we have representation, because students tell me it's important to them. So when I poll them, how important is representation in graphics or the visual imagery in your classes, they tell me it's super important. So one of the things Joe and I do is really work together on, even, you know, with the mad scientist theme, how can we represent different genders, races, ethnicities, so that every student in my class can feel that they have representation, and that it's not enforcing any kind of stereotypes. So it's something that's important to both Alisha and I as instructors, to Joe in graphics as well. So it works well for us.
We have about 10 minutes left. I've been trying to keep up with what's going on in the chat, but it's scrolling very quickly. So what questions, comments, ideas that we can take from you do you guys have?
Patty thinks we should sell extra lives for extra credit.
It's not a bad idea.
It's a great idea. So questions, comments. We do have a lot of research that we didn't present because we're kind of pressed on time today, but we are happy to share it with you. Oh, just money.
No, you're not supposed to. This is being recorded. No.
It's being recorded, dude.
No. That's something you say after.
Yeah, when it's not being recorded.
Any
That's a
clues to add
great
with more
question.
themes? I have not, but I don't know that, Pokemon is that risque of a discussion. But I think we're also mindful about what topics or genres that we're going to approach with. I think if we came up with something like super risque, Joe would probably be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So we'd have to push back there.
One of the things that me and Martha talked about when we were doing this clue board, the initial idea was to do serial killers, like real life, like Bundy and Gacy and all that. And we
It's my idea.
I brought up that, like, that's fascinating, but it could get offensive to some people. So that's kind of how the Clue horror movie thing, it kind of morphed from that. Because they're like, okay, why don't we bring in like horror icons, because they're not real, and then we gamified them. So we made them like little toys, little like pops and all that, you know what I mean? So we got away from maybe an offensive topic that could be,
I will say, Alisha and I both take very similar approaches working with graphics and our IDs, where these really do come about, again, not only as part of a mindful design, but how these things are going to go. So Joe and I we have, again, very similar interests, like the Venn diagram of our geekdom overlaps very nicely. And so with the horror versus serial killer thing, it did start with, we should go serial killers, it's forensic psych. And then we were like, okay, maybe a little insensitive, maybe we can go with movie. And then we were like, okay, we may still be pushing this. So I polled students, and a lot of them were like, great idea. But there were a couple who were like, whoa, Tiger. And so that's when we decided to go with that kind of pop figure. So again, this is where getting student input. I think one of the things we do a lot in higher ed is faculty, like myself, graphics, instructional design, admin, we get ideas about what students want or what students are thinking. And we don't just ask. And it turns out if you ask students, they're really, really good about telling you exactly what they think. I will tell you, I wouldn't base it just on one semester, because I have had students steer me very, very wrong, where they're like, no, you should do this. And then I do it, and the next group is like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? They told me this was cool and that everybody would love it. And they're like, no, loser. So yeah, no, and they do, they punk me sometimes. And I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or it's just the difference between a spring semester and the following fall where it's a new group. I don't know.
It is interesting what they'll find offensive. So like I showed a video of a Friends clip, and in it there was a couple that kissed, and it was on NBC. I figured it was fine, but there were still some people who wrote me and they were like, I am offended that this is something you showed in the classroom. I made an escape room game as a review, and it had a witchcraft theme. And I figured, Harry Potter, this will work. And I had a student who wrote me and said that they needed me to give them the questions separately because they would not click on anything that had any kind of witchcraft, pagan, anything like that. I thought it was just cute because it had a black cat in it. And I don't know if you can tell by my background, I've got a thing for cats. So it'll be interesting what they find. And like I said, you don't want to do something that's going to alienate, because then it defeats the purpose of getting the engagement. That's what we're trying to get, not the pushback.
Yeah. And again, I mean, again, we're lucky enough that our graphics department knows where some lines are. So they know where the copyright laws are, which I would violate in a heartbeat. And in fact, my ID Joe and I met with our newest graphics team member, and we're like, Disney Velociraptor princesses. And we're like, okay, we might be a little close to the edge. I know, Joe, you're like, what? But, it's me. And Joe L and I both like the Velociraptor princesses. You can Google it, or Joe might be able to share a link once we're no longer recording. But this is one of those issues where it would be close to a copyright thing, and we'd have put in all this work only to be, cease and desist. And not only do we not want to alienate Disney or our students, but we also don't want to put a lot of effort into something and then have to redo it because copyright. And for those of you doing things on your own, particularly if you're using stock images, I would encourage you to make sure your things are copyright-free images, because this is how universities can get into trouble. And again, Alisha and I will share some resources with you for those of you that don't have a graphics team at whatever school you're at. But copyright is part of what you need to pay attention to. And I know you're used to paying attention to it in other parts of your online courses, but it comes into play here too. So just be careful.
Oh, and Nancy, what we have done, or I'll use the royal we, is use things like the anonymous survey tool in Canvas, because that's our learning management system, or Qualtrics. And students are usually more than happy to share their opinion. Apparently, sometimes they like to give opinions that will get faculty in trouble in the following semester, and we can analyze that at a later date. But most of the time, they're really happy to share and to give you suggestions on things that sometimes you're like, yeah, no, not going to happen. But other times as well, I really never thought to do it that way, and it's exceptionally helpful.
And again, we both poll in Qualitrix a lot. And again, it's free to UCF faculty and staff and students. So the university has a Qualitrix license. So we're lucky we don't have to pay. That said, I believe you can poll with 10 free questions in Qualitrix, SurveyMonkey, most of those platforms. Also, you can poll in Canvas or in Blackboard. So I know some of you mentioned, like the last, the presentation quite a few of us were in before this, she mentioned they were using Blackboard. You can still do some polling in there using the quiz feature, just as a not for credit. In Canvas, you can set it up as a survey when you're in the quiz feature. And we were doing that, but if I want to look at the data over semester and I want my data to be big data, which we're both social psych, so we like big data, it's easier for us to manipulate it in Qualitrix, to be able to pull it down, merge it, pop it into SPSS and look at it. But again, it's a really easy way to kind of look at that. Yeah, so if you do Qualitrix, Nancy, this is an easy thing, and you can reach out to us, and we are happy to share some of the items that we wrote with you, and collaborate on kind of looking at, how students think about these things. Because again, I mean, I think all of our goals, you wouldn't be at this conference if you weren't interested in improving the online course experience for your students. Right? I mean, why else would you be here? It's not like you get time off from work. It's virtual. So for us, I think you're here because you want to improve. You want to make that a better experience. You're not getting paid to be in this Zoom right now, woman. So again, Adobe, do you want to take Natalie's question on Adobe, Joe? Like, I know my experience, but
Well, I do know at this point it is 3:50, so it's time, and we'll have our wrap up and overview of the conference back in the main room. So any other questions or anything that anybody may have, you can reach out to any of our presenters on Hoover or wherever socials you want to. But I did want to give everybody a chance to get back into the main room for our wrap up for today. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Martha, I'll be sending you a meetup.
okay, yeah, send me a meetup.